What's going on, guys? Welcome back. We are continuing our GCSE psychology journey, looking into the content of paper 2, and we're going to be looking at prosocial behaviour in this video. So starting off with, we're going to look at the case of Kitty Genovese from 1964. Image here we can see is of the young lady Kitty Genovese. So what happened? Kitty Genovese was a young woman who was murdered outside of her apartment building in Kew Gardens, New York in 1964. Early reports claim that 38 witnesses saw or heard the attack and did nothing to help or even call the police. But why is this important when it comes to our GCSE psychology curriculum? Well, this case was used to explain the bystander effect, and that's the idea that people are less likely to help in an emergency when others are present. There are certain key psychological explanations that explain the bystander effect, and these include diffusion of responsibility, and that is the idea that each bystander assumes someone else is going to help. So, well, I don't need to help because that guy over there is going to help. Social inhibition, and this is the idea that people look to others for cues. So if nobody else reacts, then they assume that it's nothing serious, nothing to really worry about. And fear of embarrassment. And this kind of is self-explanatory, but it's the idea that people worry about like overreacting to a situation when it isn't really that serious. And how does this link to the research? Well, this case inspired Latané's and Darley's research into the bystander behaviour, and later studies such as Piliavin et al.'s subway study, which showed that people often do help in real-life emergencies. Unfortunately, the original reports were inaccurate. Fewer people actually witnessed the full attack, and some witnesses did in fact try to help, including calling the police. And this means that the case was oversimplified by the media. In conclusion, the Kitty Genovese case helped psychologists understand why people sometimes fail to help in emergencies, but it should be used carefully, as the original story exaggerated the lack of help. Now we're going to look at Piliavin et al.'s 1969 subway study. It's just an image of the layout of the subway or underground train itself. So what were the aims of this study? Well, the aim of the Piliavin et al. Study was to investigate bystander behaviour in a real-life emergency. Specifically, the researchers wanted to see whether people would help a stranger who appeared to be in distress, and how factors such as the type of victim, race of the victim, and presence of a helper model affected helping behaviour. What was their methodology? Well, the study was a field experiment conducted on a New York underground subway. Around 4,450 passengers were observed. The victim was a male who collapsed on the train and appeared unconscious. Now, there were two main conditions of the victim. There was the drunk victim who smelt of alcohol and carried a liquor bottle, and there was an ill victim who carried a black cane and appeared sick. Victims were a mix of black or white, and in some trials, a model helper intervened early or late. In others, no model was present, so somebody jumped in to help in some instances. Sometimes they done it earlier, and sometimes they done it later, and in other instances, there was no helper involved. The observers recorded whether help was given, number one, how quickly help occurred, and the number and characteristics of helpers. But what were the results? The ill victim received help far more often, that's about 95%, than the drunk victim, who received help about 50% of the time. Help was given more quickly to the ill victim, so when people saw the person with the cane that appeared ill or unwell collapsed, then they were quicker to help. There was little difference in helping based on the race of the victim, so the race of the victim didn't really come into play in terms of how much help they received. And when a model helper intervened, more passengers were likely to help afterwards. So when people saw someone else jump in to help, then they were quicker to get involved and also try to assist. Most helpers were male, and people tended to help victims of the same race. So in conclusion, Piliavin et al. Concluded that bystanders are willing to help in emergencies, especially when the victim is perceived as not responsible for their situation. Helping behaviour is influenced by cost-reward analysis, where people weigh up the personal costs, for example, how much effort it's going to take or if they'll be in danger, against the benefits, things such as like reducing discomfort or guilt for not helping. So, as we said before, when it comes to you guys responding to your GCSE questions, you're going to be asked to either explain, where you're going to need to talk about the aim, method, and findings, or you're going to need to evaluate, where you're going to need to look at the strengths and the weaknesses of the study. So let's do a quick evaluation. Let's look at the strengths. It had high ecological validity as the study took place in a real-life setting. Behaviour was naturally observed, reducing demand characteristics. Remember, demand characteristics are when someone changes their behaviour because they know they're involved in a study. It was a large sample size and that increased reliability. What about the weaknesses? Well, there are ethical issues. So participants did not give informed consent. Some passengers may have experienced distress through seeing someone collapse or appearing to fall unconscious. There was a lack of control over extraneous variables, such as passengers' moods or prior experiences. And findings may not generalize to other cultures or non-urban settings. Alright guys, hopefully this gives you a better insight into prosocial behaviour. We're continuing our journey in the next video, so make sure you guys like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next one. I'll catch you guys then. Peace.